So we all know that one of the teams that was reportedly very interested in Kirk Cousins in this free agency period was the Denver Broncos, and understandably so. They almost sabotaged their new head coach Vance Joseph in 2017 by giving him Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch as his quarterbacks, and then later on in the year, Brock Osweiler. You have the talent level that you had on that defense. You have some talent outside at wide receiver with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, and you want to roll into the season with a guy like Trevor Siemian. It's not a surprise that it ended up being a complete and utter disaster. And frankly, Paxton Lynch in his first 2 years in Denver has been a complete, utter disaster. So for the Denver Broncos, knowing there's a head coach on the hot seat, knowing that the window of opportunity is closing with their defense, especially knowing they're going to be moving on from Aqib Talib, which they ultimately did, knowing the problems that are with the friction in the locker room between the defense that can actually play and the offense that largely can't because of the deficiencies at the quarterback position mostly, that the team was going to have to do something to upgrade at the quarterback position. Well, whether they made an offer to Kirk Cousins doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, they didn't end up with him. Minnesota did. But they had to do something. And you could say, well, the Broncos are sitting at pick 5, find the quarterback, get the quarterback at all costs. And yes, in theory that makes sense. But what happens if the Broncos don't like any of those quarterbacks? What happens if the Broncos think that won't be the guy that gives them the best chance to win in 2018? What do they have to do? What happens if things go crazy in the draft and by the time they get to 5, the quarterbacks that they wanted, the quarterbacks that they felt were worth that slot, aren't there? I mean, there are all types of variables there. So you could think about the ifs and buts, but if ifs and buts were cansies and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day. It's not a guarantee of anything. So the Broncos wanted to go out there and get themselves some type of guarantee that they will have improved play at the quarterback position in 2018. So what did they do? They went out and signed Case Keenum and got him away from the Minnesota Vikings. I know Case Keenum isn't the sexiest name. Case Keenum's not the most exciting name. But I'm sorry, Case Keenum is an upgrade over anything that is currently on the Denver Broncos roster at the quarterback position. Admit it. Now, in terms of the financials, I saw the report, I think it was 2 years and $36 million with $25 million of that guaranteed, which, if you want to say was broken up $18 million per, that's $18 million guaranteed year 1, $7 million guaranteed in year 2. You could potentially, in theory, view this as a 1-year deal. This is a 1-year prove-it type of deal for Case Keenum, and if he plays well, if the Broncos have drafted a rookie quarterback and they feel like he's ready to start in 2019, then there you go. You might play that rookie and be able to trade away Case Keenum because even if you say that a team gets him via trade, they've got to pay him all $18 million. Well, if he plays at a similar level like he did in 2017 as he did in 2018, there will be a lot of teams that will be willing to pay that $18 million for one season for Case Keenum, especially considering guys like Alex Smith getting $23, $24 million a year, Kirk Cousins getting $28 million a year, Jimmy Garoppolo averaging like $27 million a year. I mean, when you look at it, Case Keenum's contract, his salary cap figure, doesn't look that bad. And even if he takes a step back, when you look at year 2 and how much guaranteed money might be there, it still might not prevent the Broncos from being able to trade him and maybe, let's say, get a day 3 pick and return. So if things go bad, there's still an out for the Broncos after 1 year, and it's not that incredibly prohibitive. Even if you, in theory, had to cut him, yeah, you would take a $7 million or $8 million or whatever dollar cap hit, but you could still technically swallow that. You could still get away with that if you wanted to. This could also buy you the ability to address another area of your team with that 5th overall pick, potentially allow you to trade back down, especially with Buffalo sitting at 12. If they're craving a quarterback and they have to have a quarterback and that guy falls to 5 and maybe the Denver Broncos aren't impressed with him or somebody else, maybe they could sit there and peel back to 12 and they can get a first-round pick in 2019 and they get some other picks in 2018. And frankly, the truth is they need it. And that's crazy. 2 years after winning the Super Bowl, the Broncos aren't in the best place. And this isn't that surprising for a team that you look at that was largely built through free agency. At some point in time, those chickens come home to roost. So you look at it, if Case Keenum gets in there, you still have Paxton Lynch. Maybe this is John Elway trying to say, I still want Paxton Lynch to have an opportunity. I still want Paxton Lynch to have a shot. So we bring in somebody who right now we feel like is better in Case Keenum, but if something goes south, we can give a former first-round pick in Paxton Lynch one more chance. I don't feel like you should operate like that. I feel like that's kind of crazy at this point. You got to go with Case Keenum and then figure out what happens in the draft. But who knows what Elway's thought process is. But I really don't think this Case Keenum deal is that bad. Is it great? Absolutely not. Would I want to pay him that much money? Absolutely not. But that is a situation in the environment that the Denver Broncos found themselves in, and that's what they did. And when you look at this, this is really only truly costly from a guaranteed money standpoint for one season. So is it really that bad? Especially when you look at he played at a decent level and helped lead a team to an NFC Championship game this past season. They were one game away from hosting the Super Bowl in Minnesota. So Case Keenum wasn't terrible. And maybe part of the problem with Case Keenum in the past was some of the situations that he was in. And maybe those guys just didn't know what they were doing with quarterbacks. Just throwing it out there. But for the Broncos, they had to do this. And in the process, they saved themselves a crap ton of money because when you look at bringing in a Kirk Cousins, let's say if Denver had won the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes. Kirk Cousins is solid. He's a pretty good NFL starter. But he's not a true blue franchise guy. He most certainly is not elite, nor will he ever be elite. He's just a consistent performer. And for the amount of money that the Denver Broncos would have had to pay Kirk Cousins to get him there, they would have needed him to play at an unrealistic level compared to the type of player that he was. Whereas Minnesota, yes, could pay him a ton of money that indicates he should play like the superstar he will never be, but there won't be as much pressure to do so, even with the big figure, because the team around him in Minnesota is just so much better. Like, you look at this deal with Case Keenum, it's Case Keenum. So if it doesn't work out after 1 year, it was Case Keenum. And you're not necessarily tied to him for another 2 years at 100% guaranteed money. And ultimately, to me, with this Case Keenum thing, it still does not prevent the Broncos or preclude them automatically from drafting a quarterback at number 5. If they like a guy, why wouldn't you take him? Bring him in. Keenum can start. Let the other guy sit. Or if the other guy is ready, then Keenum sits. And yeah, he'll be a highly priced backup, but that's the name of the game. And then you move on from Paxton Lynch, which seriously probably needs to happen anyways. So yeah, ultimately, I don't see the Case Keenum deal being that big of a deal for Denver. I don't really see it being that bad, especially mostly because it's a short-term type of deal. Realistically, this is a 1-year deal with some guaranteed money latched onto year 2. We've seen far worse, like giving Sam Bradford $15 million guaranteed coming off of a season where he started like 2 games. That's what dumb teams do. So it's not a superstar sexy signing. It's not a great signing. It just makes sense based off of the situation and the circumstance that the Denver Broncos had. They had to bring in somebody better than what they had, and I feel like they at least, if nothing else, did that with Case Keenum. But the good thing is, whereas if they sign Kirk Cousins, that totally stops them from drafting a quarterback at number 5. Because why would you? If you had to give him 3 years of $80 to $90 million fully guaranteed, why in the world would you sit there and draft a quarterback number 5 knowing you're probably not going to play him for at least 3 seasons? You just basically wasted that 5th overall pick. But with Case Keenum, you can still take that quarterback. It also allows you the flexibility to be able to trade down and set yourself up even in a stronger position for the 2018 draft and potentially the 2019 draft as well. So there could be some really good things that come out of this Case Keenum signing that aren't even necessarily directly related to the actual signing of Case Keenum itself.